Welcome to the Money Study Podcast with Jim Bishopp. In this podcast, we bring lessons on personal finance to life, helping you achieve the dignified retirement you deserve. Jim will guide you through practical financial strategies and tips to manage your money during your working life and through retirement. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Money Study with Jim Bishopp. Jim, what is going on today?
Buddy, I'm doing really well, man. Happy to be here with you. That makes my whole day, bud.
Well, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I'm excited because we're in part 4, and I think this is a 4-part series, right?
It is. Yes, sir.
Yeah, kind of the investing basics. But on the last podcast, I said it. This isn't just basic. This is good stuff. You get pretty deep on some of these things, and it's information that people need to know. I know today we're going to be talking about tuning out the noise, which is really kind of shutting off the media, in my opinion, but not this media. This is a great podcast. You leave this running. We had the first 3. Can you take a minute to recap what the first 3 podcasts were?
Yeah, for sure. So hopefully we're not too deep by that. Just touching on that first point, I hope we get to make our goal here is to make folks good consumers, right? It's not, I don't want to be so deep that we're, overwhelming people. But on the other hand, I want to give you enough information that you can ask good, intelligent questions and sort of, feel confident when you talk to someone about finances. But the first 3 sessions, let's see, the first one was why taking some risk might make sense. And so for our audience, almost all of them are on a pension of some kind. And the pension has no direct market risk, right? You put your years in, you get a defined benefit back in retirement, and you are not bearing the market risk. Most of our clients, not all the listeners, have Social Security. Same deal there. You pay into it over your life and you get an income. So with your supplemental retirement or other things you're doing on top of that, might make sense to take some risk. And we talk about that in the first session. Mm-hmm. The second session, we talk about asset allocation, right? Or spreading your bets or making diversification in your investments, and how, risk is not all or nothing. You can have, we can be on that scale where we're pretty conservative to pretty aggressive and anywhere in between. And then number 3 is on staying the course when the markets turn against you. And we all know that if we're investing in the markets in any way, we're going to have some downtimes in the market. We're going to lose money from time to time. What we do during those times is really important. So that's what we touch on in number 3.
Mm-hmm. All right. So again, today we're talking about market noise, right? Yep. I know that you've talked about building the model, like you just said, and staying with it, and that's the part that's really tough, right? And now we're talking about the media. What are your tips here? Because it's tough to stay away from this stuff. And Jim, I got to confess, things that I used to like, just to kind of maybe relax for a bit, and I jump on Reddit. Right? Jump on Reddit and read some funny stories and see some funny videos. And then all of a sudden Reddit is just inundated with market stuff. And it's like, wow. Okay. So then it was TikTok. My wife and I enjoy TikTok every once in a while. We'll sit there and listen, watch for half an hour, share TikToks together. And all of a sudden, guess what's creeping into these TikToks? Market advice. Oh, investing advice. I'm like, are you kidding? You just can't get away from it sometimes. Yeah.
Even the late night TV is, so political. It's just almost hard to stomach sometimes, to be honest. And I'm not even on one side or the other, right? I mean, it's so polarizing, I think, that it's really hard to put the blinders on and sort of not pay attention to that stuff.
Well, and here's the thing. This is the example I use. I've taught my kids this for years, is to be careful, because the news, the media, all those channels, their one purpose is to sell advertising, right? And so you'll hear this, and this is the example I use. The thing flashes on the screen, 10 things in your refrigerator that can kill you tonight at 10 o'clock, and it's 4 p.m. So now I can't eat dinner. I don't trust what's going on in my refrigerator door. And that's just it's bait, right? It's clickbait on the internet, but media has bait too, right? They pull us in.
Dude, my kids are constantly sending me something or telling me something about, protein or nutrition or something. And my first words are, where did you get it? They go, on the internet. I say, and where did you source check it? How did you fact check it? Because
the internet.
Yeah, right. It can't be alive. It's on the internet, right? And I'll add this too. Obviously it's my job to stay in front of the media and the news and the politics and just see how that's going to affect the markets and, just sort of be in touch. So I have satellite radio. I have CNN. I have Fox. And then I have NPR, and those are the ones I flip. And it is just mind bending when I take the news du jour, the news of the day, and I listen to it through the Fox filter and then through the CNN filter, and just try to determine how different it is. And I think it's really hard, and that noise is just brutal.
Yeah. That's so. I don't know. That frustrates me.
Me too. Yeah, it's no wonder we're so polar, right? I mean, those news channels, outlets just sell the things that their audience wants to hear.
Yeah. So headline risk, right? That's something that I've heard you say before.
Yeah.
right? So define that for me real quick, would you?
Yeah. So headline risk is sort of the idea that, we'll take it from an individual company's perspective. There may be some headline risk about some news, whether it's even true or not, about companies. For example, companies' earnings, is Microsoft earnings going to be better or worse than it was? It can be complete commentary, and it affects the market's price. It doesn't even have to be factual. It can just be editorial.
Somebody's opinion. Yeah.
Somebody's opinion. Right. And it'll drive prices. Right. So that's headline risk. And I think it's something we have to be really careful about. And we have to spend it. If you're going to invest yourself, you have to spend the time and energy to like double check and make sure you know really what you're hearing, because it's a lot.
Yeah. So can headline risk be positive or negative? I mean, it sounds negative, but can it be positive?
Oh yeah. Well, you mentioned Reddit, right? It's driven, I don't want to name any names, but Reddit's driven a couple of stocks that, really are way overvalued through the roof. Right. So Reddit is an example of a media outlet that has driven prices way up. And then you think about other headline risk on a sort of larger level. It's hard to think that, the fact, I'll give you another example, taxes, right? So right now it looks like the government or the current administration would like to raise everything from capital gains to personal income taxes to estate taxes, et cetera. The reality is we got to get all that through Congress. So that headline risk, which sounds horrendous, and if all that happens, would most in the investment world might be concerned about what that would do to stock prices. And I don't mean to be political on the show, but those are the kind of things we pay attention to. But the reality is, are they going to happen? Well, nobody knows, right?
Well, and here's the thing: is that anybody who looks back on Trump's administration, right? Again, try not to be political, but Trump's administration, whenever there was a move made, the left was just up in arms about it. Well, you can't do this. It's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. And now that, we've got a Democrat in the office, the right side is, it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. And I think it's without even investigating, right? It's just who is wearing that hat. Yeah. That is what drives a ton of the population to just rail against it, no matter what the plan is. They don't even know what the true plan is or what the outcome is going to be. Like you said, getting through Congress. Yeah. Things can be changed during that process, and it could actually be a good thing. Even if you're a Republican, the Democrats might do something good, or if you're a Democrat, the Republicans might do something good. Just hang on. We've seen both parties have really good outcomes in the economy during different administrations. Right. One other thing I say is the economy. This U.S. economy is like a freight train. You can't. I mean, an administration can come in and they could have desires and platforms and policies that they'd like to implement, but it's like making a freight train take a U-turn. I mean, it takes time. There's momentum. This economy is huge. It has a lot of momentum of its own. And these policy changes take time, one, to implement and get through, and two, to trickle down and affect the economy. So it's really easy to look at the things that you see in the news and either be pessimistic, like you might think about the political environment, or optimistic, like some of the stuff we're seeing on Reddit. You just have to take a deep breath and say, okay, none of this stuff really makes a lot of difference to me today. And clearly over the long run, it hasn't had a massive impact. And if I've done my job right and I build a model through that asset allocation process we talked about in the session 2, we know how much risk we're taking in there, and we're comfortable with that. Yeah. I find Twitter a very interesting subject as far as media. Yeah. Because when Twitter came on the scene, and I think it was 140 characters originally. I don't know what it's up to now, but I don't think it's much. I think it's still under 200, something like that. But that's barely a complete sentence, Jim. Right. And people would see an idea or a thought from one person and go bananas and say, oh, that is genius. What is genius? That's a partial thought. That's not even. And it doesn't have to be factual. It's just somebody jabbering about something, right? Tuning out that new noise is really hard. There's, again, they call them Jimmyisms in my office, but I always say they don't send news crews to watch planes land safely. I think we did that before because it's a real tongue twister, but it's true, right? I mean, they don't go, oh, look, John, now another 747 landed successfully at Tucson International Airport. Nope. It's got to crash, or they're not talking about it, or be in danger of crashing, or have some likelihood or possibility, or someone speculated that the damn thing might crash. And, now we're grounding an airplane. Yeah. And my neighborhood is a pretty stable neighborhood. People have nice lawns. We try to take care of our stuff. There's never been a news crew out just to say, hey, look at all these people enjoying the outdoors, having a drink on their porch, right? There is no news crew to report. Yeah, things are going splashing around in the pool today. Check it out. Yeah, no, none of that. Yeah. So I know that you work with a ton of clients, and you've also tried to work with a lot of people that haven't, pulled the trigger or have decided to go someplace else because they just don't know, right? They're scared, or they're being influenced by media. What kind of story do you have for us? Give us some examples of people that have been influenced, whether it's, if you can share some client stories, that'd be good. But if not, other stories where that the outcome has not been great and what they could have done to fix it, maybe.
Well, sure. So, we got I've got some clients. Well, I say a lot of my job is, I use three analogies. One is a referee, one is a marriage counselor, but, and then just sort of a realist, right? So we've got clients who will call me and they're really afraid of the markets. They're afraid of the news. They're afraid of market loss. I had clients who told me during the pandemic, Jim, this thing will never recover in my lifetime. Right as the pandemic hit, we were probably down 15%. And here we are at an all-time high. Same in 2000 and 2008, right? If those people had sort of tuned that out, trusted that model that they built and ridden that out, they'd be in great shape. I know other people on the other side of the equation that have, I'll give you one story, and I won't even tell you the name of the stock they bought, but they bought a stock. It ran through the roof. They even borrowed money on leverage to buy the stock. I mean, they turned a relatively small chunk of change into nearly $1 million. They sold the stock in one calendar year. They bought another stock in the next calendar year. It went through the floor. They lost most of their money, but they still owed the taxes on the gains from the prior year. They didn't have the money to pay the gains, right? So they just started believing they could outthink the market, and they were the best stock pickers and timers on the world in the world, and they got creamed. Yeah. So our view is we try to make a smoother ride, right? We try to take some of the peaks and valleys out. Now, the younger and more aggressive you are, we're going to have more peaks and valleys in there. The older and more conservative you are, the smoother we're going to be. And sometimes the higher peaks and valleys will result in a better rate of return or a higher rate of return over a long period of time. But that's our objective. We try to make that sort of process as comfortable for you as we can.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was just thinking about an example. It made me think of an airplane, right? Yeah. You got all the passengers are on the plane and turbulence hits, right? Some pretty rough turbulence sometimes. I don't know if you've ever been on a plane like that. It a little makes you nervous, right? You get a little scared. Sure. And I just think, if somebody takes their parachute at that moment and says, forget this, I'm out, right? They dive, right? They go with their parachute. They're safe. They got their parachute, but the plane gets through the turbulence and it lands. Did the person with the parachute land? Absolutely. But they didn't get to where they were going. No. Right? And so if your end goal is retirement and you dive out just because of some turbulence and some, getting shooken up a little bit, sure, you may land safely, but you're not going to make it to your destination. Nope. Or it's going to take you a whole lot longer.
You got a long walk to get to where you're going. Poughkeepsie's a long ways from where you are.
Well, they got Uber now. You can maybe take an Uber, 200-mile Uber. That's
I'll tell you
expensive.
A funny personal story. I'm a little off topic, but I used to fly an airplane. And so when I was learning to fly, my flight instructor, it was turbulent as hell. And I told him, man, I can't land this thing. I might, I'm thinking I'm going to get sick. He's like, well, then I don't know how the plane's going to land. So we made it land, but I've been on a plane with a lot of turbulence. And you think about right now, okay, think about the markets in the world right now. Think about the things I could be pessimistic about, higher taxes, inflation, gas and oil prices, the list goes on and on and on. And if I don't tune that out, right, I might be sitting on the sidelines, but the market has done pretty well so far this year. So I just missed all of that growth. And I'll add one more thing, I think the older we get, the more sort of affected by negative news stories we are. Is it really that bad today? Because my folks lived during the Cuban Missile Crisis. That seemed like it might have been a little more, precarious than gas prices, right? By the way, we've been through an oil embargo in the 70s. If you stood in line for gas, you remember that, but a lot of us probably don't remember that period of time. So we've been through a lot of this. It's important to know that this isn't the only time this isn't the worst. I have a poster on my wall. I call it the Litany of Disasters. And it's got the markets graph, but it's also got on the timeline all of the, Bay of Pigs going off the gold standard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, going at gas embargo, Iran Contra, blah, blah, blah. And it's easy to think today's the worst time, but is it really? Probably not.
Yeah. Well, it's the worst time for me, Jim, because I'm very selfish, and it's it's all
about you're so young, Eric. You've not really lived through any hard times along your life, right?
Yeah, I've never been through a hard time, Jim. Let me tell you. Anyway, but that's just it. I think it's not that we're selfish, but all of us inherently think of ourselves, and that's a positive thing to do. However, when we let the news creep in and tell us how to feel, that's a problem. So I kind of want your opinion. News story, major media. how much of it is BS? How much of it is just not good and false? Do you think it's just all negative towards the market? I mean, everybody's saying, yes, the market's doing well, but when they're coming out with those scare stories, what do you think?
Well, I'll say that I believe so we're going to have another guest on one of these days pretty soon here. I haven't got him scheduled yet, but he's written some great stuff on how the human brain processes negative information. And I don't know exactly how the science says this, but we're more influenced by negative thoughts than we are by positive thoughts. So it's really easy to take whatever we hear and really act on those negative thoughts and sort of discount the more positive things. And I don't know that what the news media says is always untrue. It's just that it's sensationalized and editorialized, right? A lot of it is somebody's opinion, what could happen, what might happen. You can't have 24/7 news coverage without editorial, right? I mean, otherwise we'd have Walter Cronkite because he just told you the news and went home at 7:00, right?
Yeah.
But now we're 24/7. You're going to have to talk about somebody's opinions, what could happen, what couldn't happen, blah, blah, blah. And if we are influenced by the negative stuff, it's really easy to buy into that terrible news story. So I don't know if that really answered your question, but I just know we're more influenced by the negative stuff we hear than we are by the positive stuff we hear.
Yeah. And I think that, to be fair to the national media, I think for the most part, they did try to report COVID correctly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't want to steer anybody wrong in what the facts were, although you did get differing opinions,
Sure.
right? From the left and from the right, and they intermixed and intertwined at different points. So that's tough, but trying to weed through that, how should somebody react to real or perceived threats like COVID, to the economy and market?
We're going to have COVID. We're going to have, again, oil embargoes. We're going to have higher gas prices. All of those things are going to feel pretty negative. So the truth is, you need to do your best to tune that stuff out. You need to trust that asset allocation model that you built, that we talked about in session 2, the way you've diversified your bets. And I guess we have to trust history, that the market has a long history of doing pretty well, right? We got some bumps along the way. We've got some times where it's not been great, but we've always had sort of an upward trend in the economy and the market. So we have to trust in that. I guess I think about it this way, Eric, if something happens that's so catastrophic that disrupts that historical growth rate in the economy and the market and our upward trend, we're probably all living under a bridge fighting over a hot dog anyway, right? I mean, so right, we can, we know those little fluctuations, we got to ride those out. And there's not much I can do if a meteor hits the earth, right? I mean, if we get knocked off our axis, well, is my worst problem whether my stock account did better or worse? Probably not. So we manage against those small things. We don't let those small things in the media and the news really influence our investment decisions. That said, we might pivot or tweak a little bit as necessary, but we're not making wholesale changes. We're not getting out of the market because, gas prices are going up and back in because interest rates are low.
Yeah. Well, Jim, thank you so much for your time today. I mean, this is a great podcast. I think it's a great way to wrap up the series. Tuning out the noise is probably a really good idea.
Yeah.
Stay alert, but don't be, don't be scared is what I would think.
Or reactionary, right? Don't be reactionary.
Exactly.
Yep.
Absolutely. Great way to say it. And but before we wrap this up, I want you to know I would definitely share my hot dog with you.
Good. Well, we'll share them both ways, buddy.
Absolutely. We'll just, if
I'll bring the bun.
You bring the can of beans and I'll grab some hot dogs.
Perfect.
We'll sit under a bridge together and talk about what's going on.
Perfect. Sounds great, man.
All right. Thanks, Jim. And again, of course, our last thank you goes to the listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Money Study with Jim Bishopp. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Jim comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. Also, this makes it really easy to share this podcast with your friends and family. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at SJI Financial Services Incorporated, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Money Study Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speaker and/or the guest and may not necessarily reflect those held by Voya Financial Advisors. Comments concerning the past performance of monetary instruments, investment indexes, or international markets are not intended to be forward-looking and should not be viewed as an indication of future results. Investment advisor representative and registered representative of and securities and investment advisory services offered through Voya Financial Advisors, Inc., member SIPC. SJI Financial is not a subsidiary of nor controlled by Voya Financial Advisors.